How you doing, sir? Thank you for being here.
Hey, I'm doing very well, very well. I'm happy to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me on. I hope you're doing well too.
But I'm excellent and excited to hear about your new book. But more excited is I want to know a little bit more about how you got involved in esoteric teachings and what sparked the development of that in you growing up. As there was a particular episode that say, "Oh, okay, I'll get more curious about this."
Yes. Well, I would probably say that the initial impetus, the seed of everything, of I guess where I am now with everything is it probably started just in. I always felt a really close and intuitive relationship with God, whatever you want to call it. But it was not. It was something that I realize now was very, very personal. That intimacy and that relationship that I could intuit, that I could feel. It was very interior, and it was very, 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 very personal. It's probably the most intimate relationship I have ever had has been with, my Creator. But I wouldn't say that I have been interested in esotericism my whole life. I mean, I didn't know that esotericism existed until, I got sort of whiffs of it in my late teens, 17, 18, 19. Back then, a lot of this stuff was coming into the mainstream. Books by Lynn Picknett, Clive Prince, Robert Lomas, Dan Brown, all that stuff was really, and you saw it all over, in the mainstream. There were movies about it, National Treasure, Da Vinci Code, all that stuff. And so, the History Channel and all the National Geographic, all those, the mass media that young people that were interested, and, old too, people just interested in history were consuming, kind of, piggybacked off the success of these films and adopted that aesthetic and that kind of angle when investigating religious history. And so, I started reading a lot of those books, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the Templar Revelation. I started learning about Kabbalah kind of early on, just because I knew that there was something in mainstream religions, having grown up Catholic, that was not, they were not forthcoming with it. I don't know, I'm sure to some degree, at some level, the institution of the church, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, there's some level of esoteric spirituality, but that's not for the masses. And, I've always been that kind of person where it was like, even when I went into music, I never wanted to play covers. I always wanted to play original songs. It's kind of the same way. I don't want an intermediary between me and God. I know that I don't need one. In fact, it's potentially harmful to have constantly an intermediary between me and God, or, something like the Christ. That's a one-on-one relationship. That's an intimate relationship. And I wanted to further explore that. I didn't want to be only administered the sacraments. I wanted to administer them myself. So I wanted to have an active part in my own spirituality, because as far as I was concerned, I already had one, right? That intimate, close relationship with God, with the divine.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I mean, it unfolded in a series of synchronicities that I became involved with Western Esotericism. I was not looking for it. I did not know that it really existed as such. obviously I had been reading the Platonic dialogues since I was a kid. It was a weird reading material for childhood, for sure. Other people got, they got, I don't know, Goosebumps. I got Plato, but it was all my dad. He wanted me to read that stuff for very Greek, but I wasn't aware that there was an esoteric, metaphysical, spiritual tradition in any of that stuff, to the effect that it is now. I read it and immediately intuited, okay, this describes quite a bit of the relationship that I seem to have with my Creator. So, there's something spiritual about it. I never swallowed, I never allowed myself to be completely influenced by the agenda of teaching Plato as if it's strictly rational, proto-logical documents. It's clearly spiritual. But I didn't understand how it all fit together. I didn't know that there was this thing that we call esotericism and the occult. I wasn't aware of it. And eventually, by a series of synchronicities, I was led to an organization called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And I've told that story before on many podcasts, but just to reiterate it in brief here for you, my aunt had a tenant who threw herself in front of a train. And after that, my aunt asked me and a friend of mine to come over to help empty the apartment, because it turns out this young woman was, may she rest in peace, she was a hoarder. So she collected books and things, and there were piles of stuff. And so I'm helping her unload these books, and I see one that catches my eye, and I still have it to this day. It's on my bookshelf. It's called The Oracle of Kabbalah by Richard Seidman. And I said, this is going to sound pretty weird, but do you mind if I take this book? And she said, sure. So I read that book walking around my neighborhood in a single day. And when I was done with it, I didn't know much more about the Kabbalah than I did prior to that, but I just felt like this is really important. So I went on when people used to use yellow pages and white pages on the internet, and I typed in Long Island Kabbalah Group, because that's where I had grown up on Long Island in New York, and this guy's information came up, and I contacted him, and he said, well, we don't do that anymore, but there's this other thing. And that other thing was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And gradually, the rest is kind of history, but gradually I became a student of the mysteries, and I became an initiate in, that lineage.
Thank you for sharing. So it's interesting what you're saying, because it's like, it could be, depends of the teachers that you find. So it could be a lot of interference with their perspective of the teachings, or what the interpretation of what the divine looks like to them. And one of the good teachers will help you find what is that for you, but a lot of teachers will try to impose what is for them. So having that distinction is a great distinction. And going back with what you say, me being sort of in a similar path, and being talking with a lot of mystics around the world, it's like you get to find out some of the like the Catholic Church, and like the Coptic Orthodox, or the Russian Orthodox, they have all these esoteric teachings. They were part of the church at some point, and they took it away, but it's only a chosen few they get access to it. And it's very interesting how that developed and hinders the congregation. So.
And I mean, mysticism, particularly in the Christian tradition, ran parallel. There were many mystic saints. I would consider St. Francis of Assisi a mystic, obviously Hildegard von Bingen. There were many other Christian mystics, but those were considered exemplary people, and their mysticism was sort of claimed to have been a product of a lot of times their monastic or their clerical disciplines. So the church, obviously had to associate themselves with the real thing. particularly when the mystics were within the priestly, or I should say more broadly clerical, their own clerical institution. It's like we let these people break the rules a little bit because they're performing miracles, and so we kind of have to say, yeah, obviously, clearly, right, there's grace there, God is there, but, and to that point, I'm not one to throw the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of people, they understand that the religion that they grew up with or institutionalized religion of their region, there are certain very human corruptions. There are very human flaws. Obviously, we're all human.
100%.
But so they kind of rebel and they enact this therapeutic blasphemy where they throw everything away and they embrace the opposite. And to me, that's, again, running to another extreme and another lie. I think it's a very, very immature mentality. And it's one that I had. I had it. I'm not saying to point a finger at something I didn't do. I did do that, but I grew out of it. I do see a lot of people that are not growing out of it. They're leaning into that sort of thing. And I am one that I believe in the truth, the spiritual truth of the Christ. And so I don't eschew Christianity. I consider myself a Christian. But again, yeah, like you're saying, I work best outside of, the all too fallible dogma of the modern institutions, particularly in Catholicism. A lot's changed since the 1950s in Catholicism.
Yeah, I think things are changing. Is one of the probably in a lot of these old traditions. Yeah, so it might not be as faster as we want it to be. Yeah, but some things are developing, some things coming up to light, and at the beginning, for people that are lost, maybe finding some sort of religion that they give you, hey, this is our boundary, this is black, this is white, this is good, this is bad, yeah. But eventually, that's a 3 or 4 year old mentality of learning these things. And once you overcome those, you say, okay, now, hopefully we build you enough so you can start your own walk with God, whatever that might look to you, without harming others or yourself in the process, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, there comes a point, too, when you engage with the Western Esoteric Traditions along the theurgic and initiatic line, where things are clearly, if not overtly Christian, they're biblical. So you're hard-pressed to work outside of a Christian paradigm when you're working in the Western Esoteric Traditions. For instance, a lot of, mainstream clerical authority would denounce the fact that I'm a Freemason and denounce the fact that I work in esoteric orders like the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn. But ultimately, these things help people come to a more personal, understanding. The Inner Order of the Golden Dawn explores the Christian mysteries through the lens of Rosicrucianism. So it's, a lot of people don't know that because a lot of people don't get there. But ultimately, there is, I would say, there are many people are coming back to religion. They're kind of tired with this idea of spirituality. Religion has a stigma to it because it's associated with the institutions.
Yeah.
Religion doesn't have to be associated with institutions. Spirituality is a vague term because most people that call themselves spiritual, they don't interact or believe in spirits and things like that, So it's not a really great term, but we don't, part of the process right now as we undergo a lot of this transformation in the religious life of individuals and of the culture, is finding new terms and new words and redefining those things so that we can understand them better, right? Things are changing, but people are still interacting with, religious and, for lack of a better term, spiritual ideas and currents.
Yeah, That's a good point. I think it's something that's shifting, and new generations, and it's like resurfing and getting back into essence. Yeah. So what is the essence? What the main essence, your connection with the divine. Yeah. So I think with all of that is ideal. Like I say, we're going back to religion, but don't, if the teachings that you go in, or the system that you pick is try to sell you real estate in heaven, stay away from it. Yeah, because that's sort of like that is. Yeah. So if you go back and we pick Christianity, yeah, so like it wasn't a church, it wasn't the church. Yeah. So it was the people and your connection with source, per se. So yeah, I'm looking forward of this new age, new beginning, and it's sort of like with all these books coming up, and like now that you have access to whatever. Yeah, before you have only one teacher, and the teacher say do this, and then you do. Yeah, but now it's like you can cross training. If you the cross training, you have to be in a smart way, because people can harm themselves. But you start seeing like, oh, everybody's doing the same thing. They try to get we all climbing the same mountain for different locations. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that at a certain point, while there are many roads up the holy mountain, I do think that they eventually all converge.
100%.
If even for a little while, I do think that, and that's kind of the point of, initiatic orders, initiatic traditions in the West. My thing at the time was that I had been told so many different things, and what I saw was a clear effort to make me submit and conform and assimilate. Right? I went to Catholic school for a year. Of course, I got kicked out.
Me too. Makes two of us.
Yeah. I was in the Catholic Church. My mother and my aunt taught catechism. And I just saw the whole rigmarole of going through it all as a way of, there are certain sacramental initiations that were very spiritually powerful, but all the other stuff is almost like you're just beating you over the head, brainwashing you, in a big way. Now, in something like the Golden Dawn, you have teachers. They're not gurus, but you have to learn the system, and who are you going to learn it from? So you need somebody to turn around and say, okay, here's how you do this, this is how you do that, and this is what you should expect. Or they don't tell you what to expect, and then, you find out over time you're having very similar experiences. So the big difference was the Golden Dawn and other traditions that I was initiated into, they tell you, look, we're going to take this stuff into our own hands, and we're going to be interacting with this side of nature. We're going to have a practical metaphysics. And then what happens is, and this was the clincher for me, this is what what became very important. My experiences and insights, without me telling or telegraphing to anyone else, I was seeing consistently affirmed and confirmed. The other people were having the same experiences as me. Down to the, to certain minute details.
Yeah.
And so that tells you, it's like, okay, this is what I was looking for. Nobody's forcing me, to view things this way. Nobody's telling me this is how you are to interpret this. But we're going around a room and we're all talking about what happened when we did this thing, and certain insights that came from it. Insights. And they're all almost, they're all, if not identical, they're comparable to a significant degree. And so that's when I was like, okay, this is more the thing I'm looking for. It's affirmation, it's group working, having other people to not only have community, but to share your findings with, like almost like a scientific community, and to some degree, and say, okay, what can we verify here? And so, that was really, I didn't realize it, but when it happened, I was like, okay, this this is what I was looking for. This affirms me in the path that I seem to have been sort of, funneled towards by other forces in my life.
Yeah, that's the community piece and working together as one, and when I did this meditation, I have this manifestation, and being able to learn it and replicate it and teach it to someone else to have their own experience based on the similar things is humongous. And this is the whole thing about the occult, yeah, because it's hidden for view, but it's not hidden for view in a more big way. It's hidden for view because the people that's not smart, hidden for view because they're doing something mischievous. It's because it's hidden for view because you don't want the people looking from the outside and that judgment and that misunderstanding to temper what you are building and creating. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, occultism as a term was only applied that way in the 1800s by, I believe, René Guénon. He started using that term. L'occultisme is to describe a certain group of study or type of study, group of topics, but also a practice. And it ultimately stemmed from, right, you take somebody like Agrippa, Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. He writes about occultum virtutem, which just means hidden forces, hidden power. So really, even more than, people say, well, why is it hidden? We're not even necessarily talking about the group. I'm not talking, the order isn't necessarily hidden. Freemasons tell you where we meet. Yeah, and what days you drive past our buildings, it says, first Thursday. You know exactly where we are. A lot of times you know who we are. I mean, what Mason can resist the urge to wear a beautiful Masonic ring with square and compasses, or cover their car in some sort of sticker? We telegraph who we are all the time. What's hidden are the things that we study and the things that we work with, and it's hidden from these eyes, not this one.
No.
Hidden from these eyes, not this one. So that's ultimately what we're learning to do, is to work with the unseen, visible forces. A lot of things are unseen, right? You can see the effects of the wind when it blows, but you can't see the wind. I know that there are molecules. I can't see the molecules in my body. Most of nature is unseen. It has one face, but maybe thousands of faces behind that one face that you never get to see. Well, there's a way to work with those forces, all of them. And that's really what these societies teach, is we're at the frontier of consciousness is what we really are.
Yeah. And the access that we have, and the communications that we have, and more people are open to be able to, to remove the bells. And I'm and the curiosity that's out there is don't cease to amaze me from students, for people, and they say, oh, how is that? And I'm and then you start explaining, and then it's that curiosity that I think is going to bring a lot of people to that, to open up to whatever they need at that time for them, and having a strong connection with the divine or God, or however they choose to address the Creator.
Yeah. We definitely are at a point where people are questioning things and minds are opening. What happens, what enters after the mind opens? That's a different story. There's a lot of different ways that a person can go once they have this opening of the mind, right? The Greeks would have called it maybe metanoia or aporia, right? It's you're transcending your previous thought paradigm, and usually because you are struggling with something that you can't get around. It's intellectually you can't figure it out, and so the internet has played a large part in that. Also, the blatant, overt corruption in most of our societal institutions in the West, pushed people, into forums where they could talk about this stuff and investigate with this stuff. But so a lot of people are just questioning everything, and with that comes, their spiritual life and the paradigms, the positivistic, materialist paradigm that we were spoon-fed for the last, it's 100 years.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of mental and spiritual junk food, in my opinion, that's out there. So part of what I do, particularly with the book, A Formless Fire, the subtitle is Rediscovering the Magical Traditions of the West, is I want to introduce to people that may have had this experience or may have been on the fence about all this stuff. And in these circles, you could be a Freemason for 50 years and never... There's nothing saying in Freemasonry that you have to be esoteric. You can just show up and do the rituals and eat dinner and leave and do the charity. And that's all part of the society, the fraternity that we are. But, I had a lot of Masons in mind when I wrote this book, in the writing of this book, is for people who are like, okay, this stuff is starting to enter my lodge education. This stuff is starting to enter mainstream aesthetic. I'm seeing people, brothers on Facebook, talk about it. I'm hearing more about it. What is this stuff? So I wrote this book for those that may be curious and want a reliable source of information contained in a single volume, as much as I could fit it in there, right? It's 138,000 words, to give you the history, the theory, and some of the practice of this stuff, and give you context. Where did it come from? It didn't just come from, Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
It didn't just show up out of nowhere in the 1880s in London. I mean, this stuff goes all the way back to Egypt and Babylon. And the thing is, you say that, and then you kind of get lumped in with the whole, ancient aliens crowd and stuff like that, which is fine. But there is a very, very respectable and really incontrovertible. You can't argue with the fact that this stuff came to us from, the Near East, the Middle East, of early antiquity, ancient times, and then passed to us through the, particularly through the Hellenic philosophy and the Hellenistic philosophy. Plato is the best place to start and to return when you want to learn about esotericism, when you want to learn about metaphysics and the spiritual tradition of our ancestors before Plato, going back to Egypt. He recorded all of it there for the most part, and then from there, it spreads again. It goes back to Egypt with Alexander when he goes and conquers Egypt. He conquers Persia and gains Egypt. And the Hellenistic culture happens, this beautiful flourishing of philosophy, culture, and religion, and things like Neoplatonism, Hermetism, right? The Hermetic works come from that place and time. And that's what we've been working with ever since. It's all been an interpretation of Plato, really. But Plato, he had his teacher Socrates, but he was also attested to have studied with an Egyptian priest named Seknufis. As many of the ancient Greeks, they kind of grew up. They had some modicum of education. They went to Egypt and they came back like wizards. They came back like Renaissance men. And they renovated and transformed the society around them after they had contact with that civilization at that level. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all there. I talk about alchemy, astrology, Neoplatonism, magic, the mysteries, initiation. I talk about Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, Hermeticism, modern magic, all that stuff. I give you history, theory, and practice, and you will have a really strong footing on these subjects by the time you are done with it. And the great thing, too, is that one of the things that I find most appealing about the book is that I divided them by chapter, the subjects by chapter. So if you want to learn about alchemy, you just go to the alchemy chapter. You want to learn about astrology, you go to the astrology chapter. You want to learn about divination, you go to the divination chapter. You want to learn about, Rosicrucianism, go to the Rosicrucian chapter. And then at the end, there are 8 appendices that have, most of the appendices are practical. So there's how to make a spagyric tincture. There's how to perform, the lesser ritual of the pentagram with commentary, how to consecrate, how to make and consecrate water for the blessing of things and for healing and things like that. So it was quite a work, and I offer it to all these people now as something that they can count on as a reliable resource to navigate, and a really strong starting point for which path do you want to take? How do you, through what path from here are you interested in? What calls to you?
Well, there's a great offer in it's a great opportunity for people. Yeah, your book is out already. It was released, I believe, yesterday. I can't wait to read it. What was the thing that said, hey, nobody's talking about this, I'm gonna write this book, and because they need it?
Well, on the one hand, as I mentioned, I had Freemasons that were maybe starting to get interested but didn't know where to start. By the way, the internet is a horrible place to begin any kind.
It's horrible.
It's a horrible place.
I help a lot of people so I have a lot of people that they screwed up themselves pretty bad doing these very high level practices. Yeah, they don't mean that they cannot do it, but it's like, you have to you do this until you get this manifestation, and then you do this until you get this manifestation, and you continue the process. But they wanna, we are sometimes in this society, it's like, hey, I want to get to the end, and I'm like, no. If you go there, if you open that Pandora's box, without the prerequisite, now you open Pandora's box, and now we don't know how much of you will survive that fire.
Right. And that was my next point, was that really, on the one hand, I had the Freemasons that were interested in this stuff and wanted to start, but on the other, I did have an agenda. And that agenda doesn't come from personal predilection, doesn't come from my personal preference. It comes from a lack in the magical, occult, the practical communities, a lack of dialogue, demonstrating that the true vine of the Western tradition is theurgic and initiatic. A lot of people talk about theurgy. Theurgy is all different sorts of things. You call anything theurgy these days. I mean, I'm going to have a banana for lunch. That's theurgy. You just call it whatever you want. The definition almost seems arbitrary. But there is a theurgic tradition that is preoccupied exclusively with the elevation of the soul, the spiritual self. And it is predicated, right? Why would you need to elevate the soul? Why do theurgy? Well, it's because a lot of people, right, they get the wrong end of the stick. They think that Christianity is the only world-denying paradigm, religious paradigm. Not so. These men, these ancient Neoplatonists, Hermetists, they were pagans. And much of their belief stems from the idea that the soul is in a fallen state. Otherwise, why do theurgy? Why practice spiritual ascent if everything's fine and you're perfect the way that you are? No, this is very, very old, but for some reason, we've not been shown our history, our religio-philosophical history in the West. As far back as Plato, you see it very, very clearly. The idea that the soul is somehow trapped in the body the way a physical cadaver is put in a tomb. Soma sema, this idea. And then it goes even further back to ancient Egypt and their funerary rites and the idea of the weighing of the heart ceremony. You had to prove yourself justified in order to move on and stop reincarnating. The whole, if your heart was heavier than the feather, you'd be eaten alive by this chimeric god who was there at this ceremony weighing your heart with the mouth of a crocodile and the belly of a hippopotamus. Well, what is that, right? Desire, appetite. If you do not control your appetites, you will not be able to leave the material sphere. You cannot ascend, right? Even Proclus, the 6th century Neoplatonic scholar, he wrote, those who understand the body alone cannot attain the summit. So these are spiritual investigations that somehow have been passed off as proto-existential philosophy and now being tossed out of the academy. They're completely axing the classics. It's like, meantime, well, that's where our spiritual tradition is. That's our best chance at understanding all this stuff, So, but theurgy and initiatic theurgy, right? Because theurgy itself, this process of purification and rarefication, the ascent of the soul, the evolution of the soul, it has to happen in stages. And so you have to have it as an initiatic trajectory. All other forms of magic and things like that are ancillary. They're adjunct. They're supplementary to that process, but they're not the telos, right? Which is the Greek word for purpose. It's not the defining purpose of magic, of the esoteric tradition. The defining purpose of the traditions, as we find it in the historical record, and as it is transmitted down to adepts and initiates in the traditions of which I am a part, is this. It's theurgic and it's initiatic. So there's this huge push to just kind of do all this money magic and manifestation magic and love potions and goetia. You're summoning, chthonic and questionable spirits to why? What are you doing? What are you doing? So I wanted to challenge that overarching narrative by showing it's not the point. It's not the point. So this is what I hope to be a connecting link in future erudition and studies, or perhaps an impetus for people to start speaking up. Because I know there's more than just me. There's a lot of people out there that understand exactly what I'm talking about. And I hope that one day they write books and they give classes and start talking about it, instead of, I would say the most misinformed. Doesn't matter if they practice. You could practice for 50 years, but if your practice is based on a flawed idea, you are misinformed. So we gotta get more informed people into the book writing, the teaching, and the dialogue, the overarching community dialogue.
I totally agree with you. So in those a lot of the traditions, all those like manifesting this and money, whatever you see all over Instagram or whatever, those are all traps. Those are like, hey, well, you got to this level of evolution, and now you cannot do all of this. And I'm like, do you want that, or you want to continue your ascending training?
Right.
And it's always the next level. But it's like in all the traditions, So like I'm sort of speaking for Taoism, but it's like you're doing all the ascending training, and then you get to levels, and then new teacher shows up and they give you a gift, but they give the manifestation, all that to manifest or like play with tools and like things of that nature. It's just the next level of distraction. Or maybe not, and maybe not in this reincarnation. This is important to that person. So, but for people, it's like, no. let's move forward, yeah. And a lot of time that's painful, and people don't realize the tremendous amount of sacrifice that you need to do for you do your own ascension training. And I think that is something that, like you say, more people need to talk about. And this is the whole idea of the podcast, yeah, because I want to talk to people like that. And, it's like, it's very interesting for me, and because I have all this esoteric training, yeah, and then you go and the amount of, like you say, the amount of misinformation is sometimes is like, it's sad, and, people get hurt. But also, I look into the place like, well, maybe yes, that's horrible to happen, but now it's like, hey, I did this. What is the right way to do it? It's like, okay, let's start, yeah, and hopefully people find your book and keep digging into that and spark that curiosity, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I'm not going to stop writing. I'm just going to keep churning them out, but God willing. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to a utilitarian view, right? I find that a lot of the people that want to do the money magic and want to do the elemental stuff and they want to do Goetia and all that, it's based off of a utilitarian view where it's like, okay, I just want to make my life and maybe the other people's lives better.
Yeah, but also when they start, for example, when they start working with the elementals, yeah, and then they don't realize this, like, oh, this is not like a teddy bear. You're dealing with an elemental. It's not even a ghost. Yeah, it's not even a energetic parasite. It's an elemental. Is like super intelligent, and you are like an ant to them.
Well, and the thing is, most of these people, most of them, they start off having very little perspective, very little maturity, very little human experience, where it's like, as you get older and you, maybe by your own work, you strive and you achieve and do things, you realize, wow, there's no getting away from the bad in life. I'm only ever just trading one set of problems in for another. And the whole idea of personal responsibility is choosing the burdens I am willing to bear. And people they just think, I'm going to live, I want to make my life better, I want to do it quick. They have a victim mentality, and they begin toying around with this stuff, and they have no idea the consequences that they're setting in motion. And kind of to your point, maybe you will get everything you want, plus, obviously the attendant problems that come with them in this lifetime. But you have no idea what's going to happen on the other side of that veil. When you die, you may be chaining yourself to something where the next life you're the servitor. So you have to be very, very careful. There's a lot at play that people don't want to think of and don't want to talk about. And also, in the same communities, people have a problem with hierarchy. And the whole idea of spiritual ascent is predicated on a vertical hierarchy, right?
Yes.
There's certain spirits and certain intelligences govern them, and above them there's archangelic intelligences, and above that there's
constellations, yeah, and you name it.
A lot of people don't like hierarchy in those communities. They don't like authority. They bristle at it. They want to be the only arbiter of what is wrong, what is right, what I can have, what I can't have in my life. So that's why I think, there are two main rules, two main lessons before beginning really the path of ascent. And, both of them are equally important, but I would say the one apropos to our current discussion is humility.
Yeah, the humility is key. If you don't have it, it's like, and be able to surrender and like be able to be okay with not knowing, yeah, and understand that what you might understand is some sort of force, some sort of intelligence out there that is beyond our comprehension. And even though, if you go to lots of, the Tao, they cannot be described as not the real Tao, but he spent 5,200 characters just trying to explain it to his disciples. Yeah. So yeah, the humility is a huge part that people don't understand. Like, it's like you do, and you ascend your training is you do your practice and you don't expect anything in return. And whatever you get in return is a gift.
Yes, absolutely. You know, and that's another trap, right? Maybe doing the right thing.
Well, 100%. They all are traps. It's like going back to your point about it's like, hey, I'm choose this path and I choose to like be responsible for my choices and eat the karma as it shows to me. And hopefully I can transform it to keep moving forward in my life.
Yeah. And I mean, I received a significant, or I would say a not insignificant amount of Daoist training as well. I went to school for acupuncture and Chinese medicine.
Nice.
And I studied Qigong with a private instructor and also in the school and things like that. So that's a big part of my personal work is energy work, Qigong, certain forms of meditation.
Nice.
Huge part. To be honest with you, I mean, I would say that I feel just as much a connection to Taoism as I do to Western ceremonial. It's just that I happen to be able to, or at least at this point, I've immersed myself in that tradition. There was one that was more readily available to me in terms of learning and going through the systems, whereas we have certain things here. You know, I'm not, I wasn't initiated into a Taoist lineage, which there are. You know, there are many, as you doubtlessly know. There are like legitimate Taoist lineages of initiation and practice. I didn't have that available to me at the time. So, but I would say that they're so similar. The things that I
100%.
They're identical. It's crazy.
It's like it becomes cultural based at some point, yeah. So it's like, oh, okay. Well, the body is the body, and the body behaves. Whatever meditation that you put into it's going to have manifestations, yeah. But so it's like it becomes a culture, yeah. So these things shift. This meditation might shift here for that culture. Then for this culture, the end result will be almost identical, yeah. And the other piece is like when the students come to me and they go like, "Hey, I want to learn Taoism and I want to start." And in some point, I go, "What religion were you raised? What was the religion in your household?" Well, they were Catholic, and eventually, learns all this framework from Taoism. But because all the stories they fed you as a child, you're gonna have to plug that in, yeah, and then build your own stuff. But you will understand that we do basically same thing. I was working with Coptic person, Egyptian Coptic. And I went to one of the ceremonies to open the altar. It was like almost 4 hours, and then I'm like, oh, they doing this because this is what they do, and then they doing this is because. And I said, how do you know? And I'm like, because we do the same thing in Taoism. So I'm Orthodox too, yeah. So I'm a Shawnee Orthodox priest. So we do the same thing. It's just like different. You call Michael, yeah, and we call the Celestial Master. So it's like different deities they might show up, but the opening of the altar is very similar. And I remember he's getting very mad at me because I said, "Why you don't share that?" It's like because people here comes to no, so they come to not go to hell. They are not coming to ascend, yeah. So. They provide the service and support, but they are not coming to do the work. They're coming to be like, oh, I went to church, so I can be a mess for the next 6 days, yeah? So, I got a question. So, knowing that you're writing this book, let's say that you meet someone on the street or in the lodge, yeah. So you go to the lodge and you had a new person showing up, and I'm like, and they ask you, say, well, I don't know what to start, but I want to learn X tradition. It doesn't matter, yeah. So how do I find a good teacher? What will you say to them?
Well, my first question is, why do you want to learn any of this stuff? Why? And the main thing is, you don't have to answer me, but you got to think about this and be honest about it. What's the purpose? What's the ultimate goal here? And then from there, I'm not one to recommend teachers, because my thing is that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's a very cliche at this point axiom, but I do believe it to be true. If you can't force these things, a lot of times what happens is you end up, falling right into the trap of somebody who's gonna, not be great. And look, sometimes that's your karma. Sometimes you're gonna learn a couple of things from that, but also on the same on the same note, I'm more one to say, let's, do the personal work first. I can tell you, I can give you some good books. I can give you some good authorities that are making good content. One of my absolute favorites on Taoism is Benabel Wen. She does incredible work explaining Taoist cosmology and the I Ching and all that stuff. Unbelievable work. But and I can point you to some exercises. But depending on the tradition, I may not refer you to a teacher. And now, if you're interested in something like, say, the Golden Dawn or Martinism, traditions that I'm a part of, and at that point, I'll begin to sort of check in with myself. What feeling am I getting? What feeling am I getting about you? What feeling are you getting? And from there, kind of maybe suggest some further reading and court that person for a little bit and just check in and see, are you still interested in this stuff? How's it going? How's the reading? What do you think about it? I'm never going to be one to just be like, oh, I got the perfect guy for you. Because when you begin to interact with people, and this is a lost art, and I'm sure you understand it, but a lot of people don't. As postmodern Westerners, we don't want to apprentice. Like you said, everybody wants to just be able to do the thing tomorrow. And not only that, they have a distrust and a suspicion of everybody. And so, especially concerning this stuff, because a lot of us want to I want you to show me something that's going to make me believe in this stuff, right? So you're engaging. A lot of people are engaging with it, and they're not even sure if they believe in any of it yet. So then you bring them in, and they end up seeing things, right? The old way of doing things, which is you're an apprentice. You're chopping wood, carrying water. You're learning these things. You're doing these exercises. You're journaling about it. You are performing what you need to perform. If you begin to do extraneous things, that's not good. Stick to the work. Focus. People don't want to focus. They want to pursue every tiniest interest they have in all these different directions. And what happens is they're scattering their psychic forces, the mental forces, the energetic force. They're scattering all that stuff in the pursuit of what is directly in front of them. So there's not a lot of people that can commit to that level anymore. And I tell you this as somebody who's a chief of a Golden Dawn temple, and part of my business, with, my work, my duty to that temple is to, interview and assess new candidates and put them through the grades and test them. A lot of people that they don't want to do things in that archaic way. They believe it's outmoded. So for those people, they might just play esoteric tourist. They might come in, try it out, dip their toe in the water and say, not for me. But what is really involved is a closeness. I mean, you're energetically involved in the egregore of this temple, of this group, of this lineage, and so you want to keep those lines clean. You don't want to be introducing potential. Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I'm much more like, hey, let's not rush.
Yeah, it's interesting because is I like the use of egregore. Yeah, most people don't use that word or don't understand the meaning of it. But you know, the egregore has its own life force. Yeah, and whatever you introduce to it is, you know, it must be clean because a couple of things that happen. Yeah, so if someone shows to a tradition with a mischievous or malevolent intent, yeah, and then they get hurt. It's not the people who hurt them, it's the guardians of the lineage. And that is like, it's a hard pill to swallow for. What do you mean? You guys, since I showed the force, you guys, or whatever lineage, you guys doing that. And I'm like, no, you're a mess. And you're not honest. And you're not having integrity. And the guardians of the lineage are the ones that are doing the work to clean you up. And you are not listening. So, in my experience with that, the three things they usually get attacked is your finances, your relationship, and your health. And if you don't listen, you know, they will separate it. They will separate you for the group. Yeah, it's interesting, and you know, it's rare to find people to work with. I have a group of guys that have been working with me for the last, I don't know, about almost a year or so. And they've been doing the same 4 exercises every time we met until they get the manifestation to move on. And I want to move on when you get it. You know, it's not a rush. You have the rest of your life to master it.
Right. And that's, you know, that can be a potential problem with certain forms of like the Golden Dawn, where a lot of it seems test-based, right? You're taking written tests. And I mean, you got to score very high in order to pass. It's not like, you know, 60, 70. You got to get like in the 90s on this written test to move on. But the thing is, a lot of people say, well, that's kind of the carrot at the end of the stick. It might be true. But what's happening is you're being put through, right? The whole idea behind Western ceremonial is the ceremony, the ritual, you know? And so you're being put through a ritual, which in the case of the Golden Dawn is alchemical. It's alchemical. So you are now, there's a solve et coagula formula for anybody that understands that, you know, to take apart and reassemble. You're taking apart and then you move through elemental grades, and then eventually, you know, you there's a quintessence stage. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's more about it in the book. The chiefs of the order or the chiefs of the temple that are overseeing your development, you can say, look, I know all the information. I got it all here. I can spit it out for you right now. I get 100. If we don't see that you have at least confronted the challenges in the elemental grade, right? Earth element is your finances, your stability, your bodily health. You know, air grade is your concentration, irritability, memories, you focus, things like that. And then water grade, you're looking at emotions, you're looking at the past and things like that. You're also looking at the reflective quality of intellect, the intellect that looks out. And then the fire grade is creativity, will, passion, desire, drive, discipline. If you're not, these things are going to manifest themselves as certain weaknesses or strengths that you have. And if you have, we watch people very closely, you know, we're very involved with that process. We don't tell you what to do and what not to do, but we absolutely can tell you, no, you can't take this test yet. You're not allowed to take this test yet until you confront the real work. And that's the thing, you know, in the outer order, when you go through this elemental alchemical initiation, we're doing the magic to you. And then if you stay engaged with this process and move through the grades, then in the inner order, you get to do the magic. So, you know, it's there's that way of mitigating it in our particular system. And I do believe there's a direct correlation to Freemasonry. I think Freemasonry can be more hands-on. I think it can be more of a collegia, a college type of thing. There've been multiple attempts at trying to do something like that, but it's going to come down to lodge culture. I 110%. I give a lecture on it. Freemasonic ritual, particularly in the craft degrees, is alchemical, but we've got the whole traditional observance and Masonic sort of restoration movement that's sweeping through the country. And so, the lodge culture is now in a lot of those areas and a lot of those lodges leaning towards this, which I think is, Freemasonry is Freemasonry, but I think it's fantastic that this corridor of opportunity is being opened up for initiates that want to go deeper and want to do the work.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like, I was, it's like, it's a bunch of camps, and when you go to the lodge, because it's like people that are super open and people that are like, I just want to have a meatball and spaghetti and go home. And I'm like, great, but and how can you embrace all of them? Yeah. But I've been noticing in the last, I would say 5-6 years, a strong 5-6 year, people showing more interest in esoteric stuff and asking questions. Yeah. Oh, do this. And like, they come to you and then like, oh, Diego, how do I do this? And I'm, oh, okay. Oh, you're going to sit down and be quiet. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, you have to start in there because you need to quiet your mind first, yeah, and then the monkey mind and all that. So it's like, it's techniques, and I think it's like, it's a big organization with a lot of different flavors, but like the egregore of the organization will put everybody together in the right lodges for the right purpose, and I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly saw that in my own Masonic trajectory. I was really brought to a wonderful lodge that was kind of one of its kind in its area. It was great. I remember being brought in. They invited me down once I showed interest. They invited me down Fridays. They used to do traditional Gong Fu tea ceremony. With like 30-year cave-aged pu'er and that kind of stuff. And we'd come and we'd sit down for 2 to 4 hours in the office, right? All these beautiful rooms, the library, the lounge in this beautiful old Masonic temple in Asheville. And we sat in the office, like the most boring room, but hours of lively discussion about esotericism and fraternity and Qigong, Daoist inner alchemy. There's a brother in our lodge that's very, very interested in that kind of stuff. And so I had a really magical experience getting into Freemasonry. And so I kind of have some rose-colored glasses on when it comes to that. I'm like, oh, man, it's great. You just get to talk about this. And then I realized, you go other places and it's just like, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, well, I guess I got very lucky, but I had petitioned when I was up in New York, but I didn't like the lodge culture that I was seeing. I wasn't interested in, going out for drinks and stuff all the time because I'm sober. So, I met a bunch of guys that were also sober, and Freemasons that are also sober that love to drink Chinese tea. So it worked out beautifully.
Yeah, so I'm lucky you've been in a lodge lecturing a couple months ago, and our lodge, when I show up, I say, oh, okay. But some of the lodges is like, nope, we should like to talk about business, and I'm not. I would have shown the Toastmasters or BNI if you want to work on business, or politics. I rather talk about sit down with different people for different paths of life and share. Let's say, oh, how you guys doing that? Oh, great, we're doing this way, and find commonalities and learn from our differences. Yeah, so that's that's a huge piece for me when it comes to the lodge that we are right now.
Yeah. Yes, I really loved speaking for you guys, and I just love Masonic speaking. I love traveling around and meeting brethren from different states with different lodge cultures and different histories. But I definitely saw, very, very lively discussion after the presentation, and so much interest and so many good, valid points. And that's ultimately what I'm looking to have when I go and speak. Like, I give the presentation, but I really the part I'm looking forward to is the discussion afterward, especially because I know that all of the lodges so far that have asked me to speak have been interested in esotericism, or at the very least there are several brothers with a mystic's heart, like there's a real true kind of bend towards mysticism or a mystical esoteric understanding of these things, which is it's wonderful to see.
Yeah. It's and I like the ones that are very timid about it. Yeah. And they go like, oh, yeah, that's good. So anything else that I haven't asked you would like to share before we proceed to close?
Well, the book is coming out. Well, it came out July 31st.
Yeah.
A Formless Fire: Rediscovering the Magical Traditions of the West. It's on Tria Prima Press, so you can order it at triaprima.com. And wonderful artwork done by a brother out of Missouri, Travis Lawrence, did the cover art and design. Jamie Paul Lamb did the forward for this book, and it is it's fiery hot, scathing of certain paradigms, and I'm honored that he would contribute at that level. The only other thing that I want to, I've got a couple of conferences coming up that I'm speaking at that I want to mention. August 17th and 18th, I believe I'm going to be speaking at the Vermont Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn Conference. The first day is open to the public. The second day is an in-person, order-only sort of class session. Chick and Tabby Cicero will be speaking as well. September 5th, I'm speaking at Oxford University in London for the Eurotas Conference. And then September 27th to 28th, I'm speaking at the Esotericism in Freemasonry Conference. That's Brother Troy Sprue. I think they're in their 8th year. He's doing great things in Seattle, Washington. And then finally, October 24th to the 27th, I'm co-organizing and co-hosting the New Hermopolis Conference that will take place in the New Hermopolis village in Egypt. Was a heritage site and foundation constructed by and founded by Dr. Mervat Nasser about 15 years ago, and we've got some of the top scholars in esotericism: Walter Hanegraaff, Gregory Shaw, Shannon Grimes, Mark Vernon, Aaron Cheek, coming to give presentations alongside esoteric practitioners. Soledad Davies, Jamie Paul Lamb, P.D. Newman is going to be there. And we're going to have a 3-day symposium out in Egypt. And on the 4th day, we're going to have a group trip to the ruins of Hermopolis Magna, the greater city of Hermes in Egypt, the city of the ancient scholars. That's all going to be broadcasted. You guys can get more information or buy tickets at our Patreon, patreon.com/the new Hermopolis Conference 1. And so you get a total of 6 days worth of presentations, world-class presentations. There's digital presenters and on-site presenters for $90. So I think that's high value. This is a very unique conference, the first of its kind, and I'm very proud to be a part of that. So, but other than that, check out the book. Thank you so much for having me, Brother Diego. I'm really excited to have future conversations with you. Maybe we can dive into Taoism a little more deeply eventually.
I would love that. Thank you for being here, and all information will be in the description below for the ones interested with the links, and also to the links to your YouTube channel. So thank you so much.